What's going on YouTube? Welcome to part 4 of our TriCopter build sponsored by Fortis Airframes and multirotormania.com. Today's episode we're going to be focusing on introducing you to the DragonFly32 PRO, which is Multirotormania's 32-bit flight controller. And we're also going to introduce you to Cleanflight, which is the application on your computer that you'll use to configure and tune your flight board. So a little information about the DragonFly32 PRO. It's a very small platform. It's a 30mm bolt pattern. It'll fit on anything from your small racing quadcopter to a larger quadcopter, hexacopter, tricopter. There's a bunch of different configurations that you can utilize this for, and with its small platform, you're really not limited as far as what you can put it on. So a little bit about the board. You can see here on the right side, these are all of your inputs. You have your signal and then your power and then your ground on your pins, and you can actually configure these to PWM or PPM, and when you configure it to PPM you can actually change your inputs to make them outputs to control things like LEDs and whatnot. And then over here you have your communication ports. These are your COM ports. You can hook Bluetooth, OSD, some of your telemetry, anything you're going to use to communicate with the board and gather information, you can hook up down here. Right here on the left side we have our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 motor outputs, and then we also have a voltage monitor and a buzzer so that you can connect a buzzer to the board. On the bottom here we have the micro USB, which is what you're going to use to connect to the flight board to program it via Windows or your operating system. Micro USBs are really cheap. They're commonly used to charge Android phones, whatnot. If you don't have a micro SD, Multirotormania sells them, a couple bucks, not a big deal. And if you can't afford them for a couple bucks, you should probably get a puppy because life is going to be tough for you. Moving forward. Anyway, the DragonFly32 PRO, which is the board we currently have, is going to come with a barometer, an accelerometer, and a magnetometer built into the board. And that's going to help you with orientation of the board during flight, doing things like altitude hold, and some different flight modes. You can see up at the top here we have our status LEDs, and then we have additional ports for, I want to say that's for spectrum telemetry, but don't hold me to that. So, really small, compact board, easy to mount, bunch of different pin configurations. You can actually run the pins out of the bottom of the chassis for space, run them out of the top 90 degrees, and Multirotormania will actually solder these pins up for you. Now you don't have to run all the pins like I have. I've connected them all just to open myself up for different wiring configurations if I decide to change them. Because of where I'm mounting this in the TriCopter, it's actually going to be a little bit difficult once it's fully integrated to remove and change. So I just rather give myself all of my pins, and that way I can just connect and program the ports as needed. Now that you're more familiar with the DragonFly32 layout, let's jump into our computer here and let's look at the Cleanflight app. So if you don't have Cleanflight, you're going to want to go to Google Chrome, which is a web browser, and you have to go to Google Chrome, so if you don't have it, you'll have to download it. And you can just type in Cleanflight on the top bar. And it's going to bring up this page here where it says Cleanflight Configurator Chrome Web Store. You can click on that. And once you're at this page, you can see that it is an app you can download, and I already have it, so it says Launch App. You can also, if you don't have it, it's just going to say free right here, and when you click it, you'll go through the steps to download it. So we're going to close out of here, and we're going to open up our Google App Launcher, and you can see I have Baseflight and Cleanflight. We're going to open Cleanflight, and this is your home page for Cleanflight. Real simple. It doesn't actually show you anything unless you have a board connected to it, so there'll be a lot more tabs across the top here, and you can see your port configuration, and you'll see it says no ports here. Well, that's because I have nothing connected. Let me go ahead and connect my flight controller. And you'll see once we have it connected, it pops up, it pre-populates this with the port, and your port might be different depending on your computer setup, but mine is set to port 8, and you can see all of the lights flashing. And then once the lights are done flashing on the flight controller, it turns to a solid blue light. Now, if this is a new flight controller, you're going to want to flash firmware to it before you connect to it. So we'll click on this Firmware Flasher tab. And then based on the fact that this is a flight controller based off of the Naze platform, you can see we have some release candidates. These are for testing. I wouldn't download these unless you're really familiar with this. I would go to the newest Naze platform that is stable. You can see this is V1.7.2. That's February 17th of this year is when it was released. So we're going to load the firmware. And then once it's loaded, you can see this is a description of what bugs they fixed and what improvements they have made on the older version. And we're going to click Flash Firmware. Once that's going, you'll see here the top indicator bar, we are flashing. And while it's flashing, all 3 lights are going to be lit up on the flight controller. When it's done, you'll see a series of flash patterns followed by a green and blue light, followed by just a blue light. And you'll also see programming successful here on your screen. So now that we have the latest firmware, we can click connect. And as you can see here, we are connected to the flight controller. And you can see it's real time. You can move the flight controller and the graphic display will move, simulating that your TriCopter, in my case, is moving. So I'm going to run you through a quick overview of just the software. I'll go into further detail when we start tuning, but I wanted to get you familiar with it. You can see here at the top right, it's going to show you what features you have on your board. We have a gyro, an accelerometer, a magnetometer, and a barometer because this is the DragonFly32 PRO. And I'll show you real quick. You can go to www.multirotormania.com, which is where I got this, and I'll show you their 2 different flight controller boards. If we go to flight controllers, let that load, and here we go. DragonFly32 Pro and the DragonFly32 Acro. And we actually have the Pro version, and that's going to come with all of those sensors. The Acro is basically a stripped down version without all the accessories. Same I/O configuration, same abilities as far as your hexacopter, your inputs and outputs, and your Bluetooth and whatnot. It just doesn't have the, I want to say it doesn't have the barometer and the magnetometer. I'm not sure what else it doesn't have, but you can click on it and get more details. So back to Cleanflight, you can see here you can calibrate your accelerometer, you can calibrate your magnetometer, and I recommend doing those as soon as you plug it in. Before you do anything else, before you do any tuning or anything. That's a good thing to do. There's also some default settings. You can, if you mess something up, you can always go back to original. You can back up or restore if you want to test something but you're not sure how it's going to react. So you want to back up the last good setting that you had. You can also go to your ports here and you can configure your ports on your flight controller depending on what you're going to be hooking to them. In the configuration tab, this is where you're going to do most of your setup as far as initial setup for the board. You can see we've got it on TriCopter. That's what we're running. Board alignment, if you have your board mounted in a weird position, you can calibrate for it here. Let's say normally you're supposed to mount your board straight with the front of the board facing forward. In this case, in the Dragonfly, the LEDs are the front of the board. So you'd want those facing forward, but if you can't do that for pin configuration or whatnot, you can calibrate it and make it work right here by changing the way it's expecting it to face. Down here in receiver mode, you can set either PPM, PWM, your different configurations so that it knows how to handle the inputs coming into the flight controller. You can set up fail-safes. I'm not sure what RSSI and the Servo receiver provider are, but I will look that up and get you some more information on that. You can set up a receiver fail-safe. You can enable GPS, which we're going to do eventually because we do have a GPS for this unit, but I'm not going to go through it now. You can also enable, and you see I've already got this enabled on mine, you can enable LED strip, you can do a bunch of different things here you can enable. And we've already got LED strip enabled because we have WS2812 LEDs on our TriCopter. You can set up current monitoring so you can measure the actual current output or the current draw off of your batteries. You can also enable battery voltage monitoring, and this will monitor your voltage of your battery and display it on your OSD and keep track of it, and you can set presets as far as when it will alarm and what it will allow. You can also go to your ESCs and calibrate them here with one shot and whatnot. The accelerometer tab here, you can set up accelerometer trims, and I'm not quite sure about that yet. I haven't messed with that too much. Now we come over here to the PID tuning tab, and I recommend you don't mess with this unless you know what you're doing. PIDs are very in-depth. You can get in a lot of trouble with these if you're not very understanding of how they work. So unless you know what you're doing, stay away from this tab. Here on the receiver tab, you can real-time view your receiver inputs. You can go through all your throttle sticks and find out which one's aux 1, 2, 3, 4, whatnot. And you can move them and see them real-time to see your limits. When we go to modes, you can actually add ranges in your inputs, and you can assign them to different auxiliary channels to go between different flight modes and whatnot. Adjustments, you can actually set the endpoints and the travel points that it reads from your channels. Now here's the servo setup, and because we're in a TriCopter, this tab comes up, and the TriCopter uses a servo on the rear for its yaw, and you can set this up to do to calibrate your yaw so that it flies stable and so that it moves in the correct amount for each direction. And you can also do this live mode so that you can verify by watching your TriCopter that it's working the correct way. GPS, this will give you information on your GPS signal, and it'll show you different satellites and your signal strength. So if you're out in the field and you bring your laptop with you, you can set up or you can get a GPS fix, and you can look and see if you really have a good GPS signal. Because the board doesn't really tell you, it just says, yes, I'm fixed, or no, I'm not fixed. So this way you can see a little more in-depth how good of a GPS signal you actually have. The motors tab, I recommend not messing with this tab unless you have your props off. To be honest with you, if you're connected to your multi-rotor and you're in Cleanflight doing anything like this, I would remove your props anyway. But you can actually move these sliders, and you can spin up your motors, do motor tests and whatnot. LED strip tab, this is something that I will walk you through a little bit later. I've actually got WS2812 LEDs on mine, and you can configure them in here to do different things, different colors, different patterns, warnings, indicators, whatnot. So I'm going to do a video specifically on the LEDs, so be on the lookout for that. There's a lot of information here, and it's really simple, and it's really cool when you get it done the right way. So be on the lookout for that video coming. The sensors tab, you can watch your sensors real time, your barometer, magnetometer, accelerometer, and your gyroscope. And you can see, I'll go ahead and move the flight controller. You can see it react to all those movements in real time. And I'll let go there, and it's going to stable out. Logging, you can do data logging. Keep in mind when you're data logging, this tab will only log while it's open, and as soon as you click a different tab, the logging goes away. So just know that. Data flash, our DragonFly32 does not have a chip on board for data flash, so we won't worry about this tab. And then we have the CLI. The CLI is, I call it the code language interface. I'm not sure if that's exactly what it's called, but that's what it is to me. This is basically like your DOS screen in Windows. This is where, if you're familiar with the raw code of this program, you can type it in here and bypass all the user interfaces. So this Cleanflight is a GUI, and I call that a graphic or graphical user interface. And basically it takes all of this code that normally runs a program, and it makes it into a user-friendly. So when you go to configuration and see here #exit, so that's basically, I clicked a button and it input the code to execute that command. And if I were to go here and I were to change one of these settings or whatnot, you wouldn't see it, but when I click this and change a setting in the code behind this GUI, it executes a command that duplicates what I'm clicking here. So basically this is just making it user-friendly. And this is what every computer system is. Everything is based off of code, and it just looks like a user-friendly platform because they've taken that code and assigned it to different buttons and labels and whatnot. So there you have it. There is a basic rundown of Cleanflight. And another thing, when you're setting up your board, you want to always hit save before you change a port or before you change a tab. Let's say you're in LED strip. If you don't hit save, and let's say you click over to configuration and then come back to LED strip. Now mine's saved because I've already got mine loaded onto the board. But watch here. Let's see if I change this. I'll delete this one. Clear selected. Clear selected. Let's clear all. And then I don't click save and I come over to configuration and then go back to LED strip. You see it pops right back to normal. So you've got to save your changes if you want them before you move to a different tab. I think that's pretty much it. I hope you guys are a little bit more familiar now with the Cleanflight application. I think you'll like it when you download it. And if you have any questions, feel free to comment below. I'll answer them to the best of my ability. And look out for more videos coming. We got part 5 coming up where we're going to power on the TriCopter. Go ahead and set up our receiver, and we're going to see if we can't get some LED programming going. So stay tuned, guys. Subscribe to my channel. Like our Facebook fan page, facebook.com/RCScaleAdventures. And also check out Multirotor Mania. Their website, multirotormania.com, is where they sell everything that you need to get your multi-rotor going, as well as already ready to fly kits. So check them out, multirotormania.com. They actually sponsored this build and provided a lot of the equipment that we're using on it. So very great people, awesome customer service, super fast shipping. Check them out. And also drop them a like on Facebook, facebook.com/multirotormania. And we will see you guys next video.